Chris Chelios. We also had a couple years ago in the Hall of Fame, truly became a true Hockey Hall of Fame with the addition of people like Angela James and Cami. On the women's side, we'll see, I'll try and stay at one spot. And we're further, blessed and further honored this year to add somebody, when you think about Canada and gold medals and winning championships and greatness, Geraldine Heaney. Geraldine? I was kidding about it yesterday for Toronto Maple Leaf fans, and we see a lot of Maple Leaf jerseys here. Maybe it helps because last night they did beat his old team, the New Jersey Devils, in a shootout, but all those years ago it was a Toronto Maple Leaf draft pick. Tom Curvers for the 3rd overall pick, and Scott Niedermayer went on to win individual glory, Stanley Cups, gold medals, and now he's about to get in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, Scott Niedermayer. And it's interesting, a couple of years ago, Steve Yzerman was being inducted in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and he was a busy guy selecting Team Canada to become general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Same goes for the next inductee. It's great to have him back here from the Toronto area, but now he's busy working in the NHL front office. He was one of those guys that they probably reviewed some of the video of him years ago, the style he played as a player, winning Stanley Cups, representing his country, and about to get in the Hockey Hall of Fame, Brendan Shanahan. Brendan. So like I said, grab all the pictures you want, and we'll be taking some questions from whatever you want to ask out there. I think though I'll start with Chris, because we see all kinds of young people here wearing, whether it's Blackhawks, Toronto, Sharks, you name it. But I'm curious, as a young American kid goes to play hockey in Saskatchewan, the passion, the love, but when you're a kid, what team are you cheering for and what players are your idols?
Oh, for sure, growing up in Chicago, be the Blackhawks, and you didn't get to see a lot of games on TV back then. Obviously, everybody knew that the games were on TV, but we did. Great players, Bobby Hull, Stan Mikita. Keith Magnuson was the heart and soul of the team, so he was one of the fan favorites. Obviously, he passed a few years back, but I loved everybody. I could name all of Whitey Stapleton, Bill White, go right down the road, Doug Jarrett. But for sure, I was a Hawks fan.
Geraldine?
Obviously, I was born and raised in Toronto, so I'm a Leaf fan, and I guess the players that I really, looked up to and idolized was like Lanny McDonald, Daryl Sittler. So looking forward to the game tomorrow night to play in the Legends game.
That's right. You guys get to play against some of your idols. Scott Niedermayer, growing up out west, who were you a fan of, and what players?
Well, I was probably secretly a fan of the Oilers, but everybody else was cheering for him, so I kind of felt it was my duty to cheer against him. So if it was the Islanders or whoever was playing against the Oilers at that time, I was cheering for, but it was a lot of fun, obviously, watching the Oilers in the 80s win some Stanley Cups and play a pretty exciting brand of hockey.
Now, what players?
Well, I mean, they obviously had a pretty stacked lineup there with Gretzky and Messier, and obviously Paul Coffey being a defenseman. He was a lot of fun to watch, and it looked, just watching him being involved in the offense with those guys, it was a lot of, sort of a dream to be in that situation, so a lot of fun.
Brendan?
I grew up here in Toronto, so the Toronto Maple Leafs were my favorite team growing up. Through the Ballard years, we didn't always have the best of seasons. But he was a real character, and he had a lot of personality, and I always admired Daryl Sittler, and still do to this day, the way that he was a captain of the Leafs when I was growing up, and I just think that to be in a city with this much pressure and to have gone through some of the difficult years that he did and handle himself with such class, still to this day is very impressive.
I mentioned as well the team honors, the Stanley Cups, and I'll start with the guys first and then talk about gold medals, but I'm wondering, you see the Stanley Cup being brought in, we did it as kids, but now kids always do it. They pretend they're hoisting the Stanley Cup. It's become, look at the 67 Leaf team, the cup was on the ice for about a minute and then they were gone. It was done like that. And now it's quite a ceremony, quite a lot of things. And I'm curious, Chris, when you first win it and you hoist it, what do you think about, who do you think about?
I just think about that parade in Montreal. I think it was supposed to be an hour and a half. Having each fan pass me a drink every minute of the parade, and a 1 hour and 15 minute turned to a 4-hour parade. We were stopped, and we actually left our cars at some points to run in the restaurants and talk to people. So without a doubt, that stands out in my mind the most is that parade down St. Catherine Street. And seeing the cars in front of us, all the wives and kids were in a big trolley, so obviously look at them the whole time, but in the meantime, over 1 million people on the street, and that's tough to match.
And it came pretty quick for you relative to your NHL career, and Scott, you go to the New Jersey Devils when they weren't a great team, and you get to experience them emerging into greatness. What was that like? The Cup.
Yeah, I was pretty fortunate to have won, in '95. I was just 22 years old at the time, and pretty young, pretty green, and really just grew up watching, exactly what you're talking about. Those guys carrying the cup around the ice, your idols out there doing that very thing, and then all of a sudden you find yourself getting a chance to do that. And pretty hard to believe, pretty exciting. Like I said, I was pretty young at the time, so there wasn't a lot of analysis or deep thought going into it. It was just like, this is great, let's party and have a great time. So it was fun.
And Brendan, you were there for a few years before it happened. What was that like when you got to hoist it like I imagine you did with your brothers all those years ago in Mimico?
Well, it's great. I was playing in St. Louis, and before that, I thought we were getting close, and then I got traded to Hartford, which obviously a well-run organization, and they were on their way. They eventually got their trip to the finals and the Stanley Cup, but at the time it was a bit of a step back, and it really made me hungry. I was going into my 10th year, and Jim Rutherford traded me to Detroit. So, and I joined a team of guys that were hungry to win as well and break a long drought in Detroit. So, to go through that with so many new guys on their very first cup, and then to be able to bring it home and party with your friends. I think we got it for 2 days here, and we made the most of the days.
And Geraldine, when you talk about